what really I bring to the table is a bit of a more public company experience and background where I can talk to retail investors, investors like yourselves, brokers, institutional investors, private equity groups, and really come up with a plan to get exposure across the market. We talk with investors constantly who have never heard of salt, who have no understanding of the market. And I wanted to educate myself very quickly so that I can help to educate them, to bring them to the level of understanding where they're comfortable in seeing what we offer.
Nolan, we are ecstatic to chat with you today here on Mindstock Talk. We've been wanting to talk to you for a little while, and we understand that there's been some pretty big changes. Begs the salty question. Oh, have to get right into it, right? Okay, so you recently took over as CEO in June, right? Is it June? Okay. And so for investors that are unfamiliar with your background, could you just briefly introduce yourself and explain what drew you to Atlas Salt and what's the deal? What's going on?
Yeah, no, it's always a good question. So I graduated from engineering at UBC. I was a metallurgical engineer or process engineer as well. First number of years I worked in the co-op space. I worked for some big companies, Rio Tinto, which owned the Diavik diamond mine at the time. So I did some work there as they transitioned to operations. That was my first taste in mining. And then I worked at the Kitimat Alcan at the time, but then later Rio Tinto smelter in Kitimat. And then I worked for British Petroleum in Northern Alberta in the oil and gas industry on project maintenance for like natural gas wells and production fields. So it was a good co-op experience and, confirmed, of course, that I liked mining and or liked resource industry. And then when I graduated, I joined a consulting firm, engineering consulting. So for those who know what these type of companies do, they're the ones that work for the big companies. They put out their feasibility studies, their engineering work. So, I was going to site, I was doing in-field work, project engineering, putting together schedules, budgets, financing plans with the clients, and then did a number of construction activities. Again, went back to Diavik and did some work there. And then I joined New Gold in 2011 and was involved in building the New Afton mine on the construction and commissioning side. And then I joined the project development team at New Gold and was involved in the feasibility study on the Blackwater project. And then we acquired the Rainy River project. And then I was involved in the feasibility study there. So a lot of history of developing assets, a mix of construction and getting involved in the financial planning side. Now, around this time, I started to work and realized that I liked business and I liked finance a lot in the mining industry. So I got an MBA and a CFA concurrently with work, and then I started to transition into the corporate finance field. And then I was overseeing some of these projects on the FP&A side. So I went to New Gold and worked in Toronto for 5 years, and then also at 𝐀𝐒𝐿 Resources. And then with the Hope Bay project as we were transitioning that into operations. And then I left 𝐀𝐒𝐿 when Agnico purchased us. And then I became a CEO at a very young age of a company called World Copper, which we were advancing projects in Chile and Arizona. And then now I'm here at Atlas Salt working on the Great Atlantic Salt Project. So sorry, that's a very long-winded answer. I don't know how much detail you or your viewers want, but you got the whole spiel. And now how did I get to Atlas Salt? Well, as you can tell, I like to build things. I like to advance assets. I like to solve problems, whether that is advancing a project past permitting or advancing a project in coming up with creative ideas to solve issues community stakeholders might have or financiers might have. And so that's what attracted me to Atlas, that we have an established asset, fantastic economics, a lot of de-risking has been done. We have an environmental assessment that's complete. We have a feasibility study that's completed as well. As you alluded to just last week, and we'll probably talk about, we got early works permits that allow us to advance the project once we have financing. But now it's the pieces to how do we get the support to actually build this project and develop it and advance it forward. And that's why I was intrigued and joined the company.
I've been watching the stock for quite a while. It's been to $4. It's down to about 40 cents. The property has not changed. The grade doesn't change because it really can't. The market's one of the most stable industrial products there is. But the big change has been leadership. So you're going to bring a different package to the company. You've described to us how that might affect how Atlas Salt goes forward from there.
Yeah, so I obviously wasn't here for the run up. It's always good when a stock goes high, but when it trails back, it creates kind of this what's wrong with the asset, what's wrong with the project, like you alluded to, right? I don't think there is much, but what really I bring to the table is a bit of a more public company experience and background where I can talk to retail investors, investors like yourselves, brokers, institutional investors, private equity groups, and really come up with a plan to get exposure across the market. We talk with investors constantly who have never heard of salt, who have no understanding of the market. And I wanted to educate myself very quickly so that I can help to educate them, to bring them to the level of understanding where they're comfortable in seeing what we offer. So yeah, that's I think the biggest change, the biggest strategy that I and Jeff Kilborn, who's our CFO, who joined as well, we bring a lot of experience because we've spent our entire careers working for public companies, understanding the kinds of questions and things that investors like to see. And so we can act proactively and aggressively to answer those questions and to answer it in the right channels and avenues, like sitting down and chatting with people like yourselves.
To piggyback off Kevin's question and obviously your answer, so we had looked at Atlas Salt previously, and for whatever reason, we just decided to hold off, and I'm just going to be completely transparent about it because there was just something that didn't sit quite right with us. And so with the new management taking over, it's reinvigorated our interest in the company. So I guess the question that I would next ask is, because the salt industry in the mining world is so undervalued, it's relatively doesn't have proper face value, what would you say would make the Great Atlantic Salt Project in particular with this company unique within the salt industry?
Yeah, so the salt industry, I would say, is actually quite valuable if you look at it. The problem is there's not many publicly traded salt companies out there. So that's where you have investors who are like, oh, I'm not familiar with anybody who makes salt. There's one major publicly traded salt company, which is Compass Minerals, which anyone can look up. They're traded in the United States and they're worth over $1 billion. And a lot of other companies are involved, but they're private. So investors can't really take a position or get an understanding of what the market looks like. So you have Cargill, for example, which is a major player in the salt industry, and of course in a lot of industrial minerals as well. And then you have private equity groups like Stone Canyon, which owns Morton and Windsor Salt, and they're quite sizable. And just to demonstrate the value that is out there, they did a transaction, I think in 2020, where they bought 𝐀+S Holdings. Now we're getting quite technical again with the movements of private companies, which most of your investors are familiar with public companies. So you really have to look into these things. So they bought 𝐀+S Holdings, American, U.S. domestic salt production, and some Canadian, I believe, and some international. But that transaction was at $3.2 billion. And it was at a 13x EBITDA multiple, I think, when it closed. So there is money to be made in the salt industry, certainly. And for us, it's educating the market. Again, bringing this story that, people are quite familiar in traditional mining, investing, gold, silver, copper, diamonds, lithium, nickel. These are all things people have heard of and seen the transactions of, whereas a lot of this in the salt space has been done a little bit behind the scenes. But again, the money is there. It's big money, it's big dollars in salt. It's not small potatoes by any stretch.
Speaking of great, let's talk about the project a bit. Yes, it is salt. It's in an incredible place now that we've studied it pretty closely, and we did look at it earlier. We like it a lot now. You've changed up management. We'll get into financing after, and you can explain it to the people. But right now, let's talk about the project.
The project itself is on the west coast of Newfoundland. It's near a community called St. George's. St. George's is about 1,000 people. and it's on the coast. And then the next nearest community is about 20 minutes away. It's called Stephenville, and it's about 10,000 people. Now, our site is right beside St. George's. So it's 3 kilometers away from a deep water port that already exists. And that's a critical key piece of infrastructure for the movement of our salt or any bulk industrial product, in our case is salt. And so that allows us to build a conveyor directly to the port, which lowers our operating costs and eases our logistics challenges. Now, which to be fair, are not very significant because we have established infrastructure. We're beside a community. We're, I think, less than 5 kilometers away from the Trans-Canada Highway. We're less than 2 kilometers away from grid access to Newfoundland Hydro, which allows us to tie into the hydropower grid. And our entire site, that allows our entire site to be battery electric powered, which, as a side note, makes this one of the greenest, if not the greenest, projects in mining in the world right now. So the greenhouse gas emissions at the site will be in the order of 4 Newfoundland households equivalent per year. Now, getting to the deposit, it's a very shallow deposit. It's less than 200 meters at the first mining. And that allows us to create a drift access, like an angled drift access, standard drift mining. And that allows us to put a conveyor in. And that is the key advantage compared to many of the older salt projects or any potential new salt project that may come out. They tend to be very deep, starting at 500 or 600 meters of mining. That requires shaft mining. So an easy way to understand it for your viewers is escalator versus elevator. Which one can move more people or product, and which one is more expensive to put in? In this case, the elevator is the shaft mining, more expensive to put in, more expensive to maintain, and it moves product slower. We are the escalator, taking the product directly from our shallow homogeneous deposit straight to the port. Now, the deposit itself is high grade. It's 96% salt. This may be also quite shocking to many of your viewers who are used to dealing in grades of copper of less than 1% or grades of gold in parts per million, but this is 96% product. So we have very little waste, and the processing does not require water, does not require chemicals like cyanide or sulfuric acid for leaching, doesn't require leach pads. It doesn't require a tailings storage facility. Because we have essentially no waste, it doesn't require large waste rock stockpiles. These are all key infrastructure risks in the development of a mine, expensive costs that we don't have as well. So yeah, when you really put it together, fantastic asset, fantastic resource, very sizable, over 1 billion tons of salt in resource. In reserve right now, a 34-year mine life feasibility study that supports, at a feasibility study level, after-tax free cash flows of over $100 million per year. So 34 years at $100 million per year after tax. And then on top of that, the resource expansion potential, which could add many decades to the production. So yeah, the fantastic asset in a great jurisdiction and great location.
So jurisdiction, just bringing that up for a minute, might be important for people to realize. I think you had explained to me once that as far as government support goes, you have that. And I think to some degree that ties into financing.
Well, absolutely. I mean, to get any mine built, especially in Canada, you need to have advanced it through the process where you can start getting your permits. So we have the environmental assessment complete. And implicit in that is that the government has run a process and community consultation and interactions to say, yes, we're okay with this project going ahead. And then talking about getting the permits themselves. We've got early works permits. We're going to be starting to work on the main permits. But then the broader economic considerations is, they want mines like this built in the region. They want employment opportunities in the region and business opportunities for local businesses in the region, which we're very supportive of. So Newfoundland has a number of mines under development or projects that are pushing forward. Some well-known names like 𝐀𝐓𝐋𝐀𝐒, 𝕊𝔼, Newfound Gold, Firefly, 𝐀𝐓𝐋𝐀𝐒 is getting involved in the region as well. And so we're just at the, at the forefront of that, getting into the mix. Remember, we were here well before some of those names were involved, and we've moved through the process quite rapidly as we've developed. And it's a testament to the merits of this project that allow it to go quite quickly and to have the level of support that it does have.
One thing I wanted to know myself personally, because we talked about your footprint environmentally and how low it is, and then we were talking about the financing and government and things like that. Has there been any sort of grants or anything that would lend to the project?
So there are a number of grants that we have accessed in the past, and we look to access as well. Most of them are focused just on generally supporting mining development and economic development. We are exploring, baselining our operation against a typical mine in either salt or other sectors, so that we can demonstrate a meaningful delta, because we should get that credit, as you mentioned. Instead of a mine that's already in operations and decides to use electric equipment and then can claim a savings, we should be able to say we could have used that, but we are deciding to use electric equipment, and we should also be able to claim that savings, right? And then also displacing, because the salt market is, I didn't mention earlier, but the salt market is in an import deficit. So we're actually importing a lot of salt into North America, which comes from foreign jurisdictions on bulk shipping containers, right? So that can offset greenhouse gas emissions as well. So the more we can make a case for that, we can go, as you said, to government or regulatory agencies or third-party markets in some cases and start trading offsets. That can create a financial value for the company. That's an initiative that I'm starting very quickly as I've taken over as well, that wasn't necessarily considered before. Beyond just, we are using electric vehicles. It is a great idea. It's a great concept, but also let's start to get some numbers around what that means and what value we can attribute to that.
Nice.
So good point.
Yeah.
That's very extremely important. It could become even more important as the years go towards actual building out the project itself. Two things I wanted to ask you about, stick to kind of one. You mentioned importing salt, that North America imports it into, I guess, the various markets such as de-icing and that. Briefly, can you just give us a dynamic on that? Because I think the price of salt is fairly stable, though.
Yeah, so you have a situation where North American producers are high cost. They're operating in the high end of the cost curve. So as I think we mentioned, there hasn't been a new salt mine built in North America in the last 25 years. And by the time we're in production, it'll be closer to 30 years. And, people will then ask, why is that the case, Nolan? And as I alluded to or mentioned, it's the deposit and having the infrastructure and location that we have. So you have these high cost operations that are historical. Their equipment needs to be repaired, or they have entrenched labor contracts, are things that drive up costs, and it's a constant challenge for them to keep costs down. And of course, you're moving a bulk product, so you need to ship that. These mines, if they don't have access to a lake, for example, Lake Huron, which 𝐀𝐓𝐋𝐀𝐒 operates on, which is the largest underground salt mine in the world, or they operate near a large center in the US. So, for example, I think there's a mine near Detroit. They operate at high cost, but if they're not near like a dedicated rail line or a deep water port or something of that nature, they're limited in how far they can ship and still be profitable. Now, when we talk about foreign salt, their operating costs tend to be lower, but then their balance is 4 to 5 times longer shipping from those jurisdictions, and the costs associated with that to bring that salt to the North American market. And that creates the equilibrium where the high cost producers would like to raise the price that they're selling for so they make more money, but then they're counterbalanced by the shipping from foreign jurisdictions that can produce at a lower cost, but then have to pay the shipping costs. So that does create an equilibrium, but as I mentioned, it's at a deficit. So I think the total salt market is in the range of 60 to 70 million tons. Our mine will only produce 2.5 in the original feasibility study per year. And so not a substantial component. We're selling into that market. And then the import market is 10 to 15 million tons And it's been that way for a number of decades. There hasn't been a new supply created in North America to counter that. And we aim to be the first one to start to displace some of that foreign supply competitively because we are lower cost.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It helps people understand that there's a stability in the market and there's a deficit as we move forward. And your market is North America, the eastern side, I'm going to assume, because obviously ships can leave your port and head right down the coast. How will this affect capital that you'll need going forward? And I know you have an interesting way of going about structuring it as you go forward and raise it.
Yeah, so we're working with a group called Endeavour Financial out of London, and they specialize in putting together funding packages for projects of our nature that are well developed, have a great pedigree, great fundamentals that can be marketed. Now, with a project like the gas project, Great Atlantic Salt Project, because it has an extensive long life in the feasibility study, again, 34 years. It has very robust after-tax free cash flows of over $100 million. This creates a long, stable runway that attracts potential debt financiers, which is not something that is typically available as a channel for resource or resource companies, which are more private equity, strategic partners, off-takers, because they're aiming to make as much money quickly as possible. There's no certainty that they have a long, extensive mine life. We are more viewed in that category where we're like a coupon paying company, right? Invest in us today and you get your coupon every year, potentially dividends into the future, long cash flows that you can hang your hat on. And so this has opened up the opportunity to work with sovereign wealth funds, major infrastructure funds, export development credit agencies. And so that's where Endeavour is trying to work with us to line up that level of financing. And then we have to, of course, bring some of our own money to the table. And by our money, I mean equity investors. But they want to see and would, of course, like to see what's the funding going to look like on the debt side. So we work in parallel. It's like climbing a ladder. You take one step here, you take one step, etc. And that's how we're going to put this project together and get it going and across the line. It starts with having a strong share price, putting the marketing out there, getting new people in positioned early so that they can see that uplift later. They can take pride in being a part of a great story and a project, and that gives the debt component confidence, and then vice versa, and we build off of that.
You've actually sort of led us right down to our next question, actually.
Sure.
So in terms of development within the last year or whatnot, significant milestones in accordance of achievement within the last year or so, permitting successes, any sort of technical advancements that you're able to share with us that investors might actually find value in and really want to start to pay attention to what's going to be coming down the line.
Last year, we signed an MOU with a company called Scottwood Industries, and they are a major distributor of salt into the US market. They focus on the retail salt market. And this is, the types of bagged salt that you would go to Canadian Tire or Home Depot or Walmart and pick up and sprinkle on your driveway. It tends to have a higher margin than the bulk de-icing road salt market, but they also could potentially play in that region as well. So we have an MOU with them. That's a good starting point that we're looking to expand and build upon. And that's a big plus, right? Because they see the potential to partner with us in the future to take some of our salt. And it's one less thing that we need to worry about when we're selling, right? We also have an agreement with Sandvik Mining. So they've been identified as our equipment supplier. Sandvik, of course, is a great name in the mining industry, a Swedish company at the forefront of technological development. And so they're very big in battery electric vehicles, which, as I mentioned, we'll be using for our project. And that they were selected as the equipment partner last year, and attached to that came a financing package, or at least a commitment to work towards a financing package to fund the development of that can be looked as in a way as funding our capex, because we'd use the financing to fund the equipment that we would ultimately use to put the mine into production. So in a way, you can say that a lot of some of the financing has been lined up already. So we've got offtake agreements in place. We've got financing agreements, equipment supply in place. We're working on developing our operational readiness plans. engaging our lead engineer who will lead us through the detailed design. This will be another well-known name in the industry once it's public, once we've selected them. And then we've got the permitting process, which we just completed an early stage early works permit. And then we've done a number of in the process of a number of third-party due diligence reviews with Endeavour Financial as part of the work that they're doing. So a lot of advancements in de-risking, and every step is just another check mark in the box, a tick that we're on the right path, that we're building momentum. Look for more of that in the future as well, as investors start to take notice of this story.
I think it's a really interesting story, and we've never had a chat on Minestock Talk with another salt company, because obviously we know they're super rare. But
Yeah.
to me it seems like, I mean, it's a completely different animal, really. If you look at it, makes me want to just start licking the ground. But
in some ways it is, but in some ways it isn't, right? Because at the end of the day, we're still mining, we're still using mining equipment. We still have to go through mining EA processes. We still have permits from mining operations. We still make money at the scale of traditional mining projects, in many cases, longer scale and larger scales. If anything, it's similar in more ways than it's different, and it's simpler in many ways. It should be an easy story for people to wrap their heads around. As I mentioned, you don't need to worry about tailings risks. You don't need to worry about supply risks. I had an investor ask me, inflation, is that going to be something you need to worry about? And I said, well, think about a typical mine. They have to import diesel in many cases, or they have to import cyanide or other globally relevant commodities that other mines around the world are using. Our biggest cost drivers are labor, and we're in Newfoundland, which is, not exactly a hotbed or high cost of living or labor market. In fact, they want more local jobs in the community and area so that people don't have to travel so far away. So that makes it more attractive for us to offer employment opportunities. And electricity, since we're battery electric, well, we tie in to the Newfoundland hydro grid, and we're into a regulated government-run market. So we don't have risks that other mining companies would traditionally have, and we're not operating in foreign jurisdictions where what's the labor market going to be like? Do you have to import labor from Canada to fly to Africa or South America to run your mine? We can do that all locally. So yeah, I really just think if you look at it holistically, much simpler, and then you start looking at why is it so special? What makes it so attractive? Your interest gets piqued, and then you start to talk and think about it. But absolutely, I love talking about the project, as you can tell.
Again, it's very fascinating. And so this is probably way off topic, and the process is probably identifiable, like what you're saying, with other aspects of mining itself. How do you actually get the salt out of the ground?
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Also a very very simple and different way to do it. And I want to point out a key differentiator too. So in a traditional underground mine, most people are familiar with like hard rock mining. So you're drilling, you're blasting, it creates off gases, vapor, ventilation needs. You have to put people into refuge stations for safety reasons, but we are using continuous miners. So just think of a big giant drum or cylinder that just chews through the salt and crushes it at the face to an extent. And then that salt comes out the side or the back or wherever the case may be, is loaded into a haul truck, a similar haul truck as any other mine, put to a underground crushing facility. Again, all underground, so it's not disturbing anything at surface, crushes it underground, and then, which is, conveyors and everything. And then it's put onto our production conveyor, which takes it to the surface. There's a little bit of transloading at the surface, or transloading is a shipping term, but transference at the surface into piles, and then it's put on the conveyor that takes it to the port. It's that simple a process. There's no drilling and blasting. There's no processing of the ore through a mill facility, which is my bread and butter as a process engineer. But there's no leaching, there's no flotation, there's no thickening, there's no grinding, there's none of that stuff. There's no high pressure leaching. There's no autoclaving, no chemical usage, nothing of that nature. It really is just simple old-fashioned mining at a serious scale.
Does the salt lie in veins like you would find in silver and gold, or do you find them in chunks? Like, what would an actual piece of salt look like?
96% or better grade of the deposit. That means that when you see a salt deposit, it is almost entirely salt. So you can visualize it, and it's large scale and homogeneous over kilometers in width and many hundreds of kilometers in thickness, or not, sorry, hundreds of meters in thickness, not kilometers. So think of it like a pillow underground. No veins that you need to target, no different deposits that you need to, think 5 or 6 different deposits that create your overall deposit. It's just a giant pillowy mass of salt that as soon as you access, you just put a continuous miner and it just starts chewing through it day in and day out as it creates as it develops the mine. And the salt itself also is the structure of the mining areas. It's called room and pillar mining. So you have creating these giant rooms, which, I'm not a mining engineer. I think it's like 25 meters by 25 meters. And then you have the pillars that create the stability. And then you're on to the next room. My engineers will kill me. They'll say, well, it's no 50 meters or 100 meters. But whatever the case may be, it's a room and pillar setup where you create this chunk of you mine a chunk of salt out at mass scales over many days, and you process it, and then you're on to the next room. Yeah, it's completely different.
Wow.
Well, I can say that we would like to come and see it when it goes into production like that, because it would be one fascinating type of mining to get a look at. But let me ask you this question. For investors and those that are watching, what can we expect to see happen in 25, what's left of it, and into 26 that could do things like affect the stock price?
It's always risky for me as a CEO to say that this or that will affect the stock price. But things that I would look out for would be things like updated feasibility studies. So as part of our permitting more of the financial process and our desire to maximize and make this project as attractive as possible, we are doing an updated feasibility study. And in the original feasibility study, we planned for production of 2.5 million tons per year. But there was a lot of headroom already designed and priced into that feasibility study that could take it to 4 million tons per year. And so we're working in the updated feasibility study to make that a reality, or as close to that reality as possible. That would involve or result in moving production forward, increasing cash flows earlier. That could make this a more attractive project on the financing and equity side, and just in general. So that's something to look out for. Look out for developments on the permitting side as we advance permitting. And then also we are, of course, always exploring strategic deals and offtake partnerships and other types of structures like that could make this project very attractive or further de-risk it. So in the process right now, it's focusing on de-risking and making the project as attractive as possible for what we believe we can produce from it. And so, yeah, I would say look out for that, and look out for seeing my face more often around, not only with you find people, but in other markets and areas. Maybe there's overlap with some of your viewers, maybe not, but investors can take comfort in the fact that we are out there really marketing the pluses and positives that this story brings and offers to them. And we're going to be defending the share price aggressively in the future.
Ooh, I like that.
So,
like that.
So sure do. As a stock trader, I love the sound of that.
Absolutely.
Working hard on getting things out like that. Project's incredible. It's located well. New management in now. You've got a financial plan that makes more sense to us now than we had in the past, not to put anyone down. And you've covered some key highlights. So I think our retail audience will be pretty happy to have a good salty taste of project.
Oh, you made it funny for once.
I normally don't tell many jokes.
And I am one thing I do like to mention when I can, I'm fundamentally a retail investor myself. So I self-direct a lot of my investments. I'm not one of those guys who runs money through brokers and stuff like that. I keep an eye on my investments, so that gives me alignment with the retail crowd a lot, so they can take comfort that I'm always thinking about what does a retail investor like to see from the story. I put my money where my mouth is as well. I have invested in the stock in the open market with no requirement from the board or management or company policy to take a position. I just love the story. I want to have more a piece of it than even what has been provided to me as part of my job. So yeah, that just I want to get that across as well. We have a kinship there.
Calling all savvy investors in mining and resources? Seeking the inside track on Atlas Salt? Look no further than minestalkers.com for cutting-edge knowledge and real-time stock updates. Visit for the insights and stay for the gains. Seize the opportunity and explore the magic at minestalkers.com. Uncover new investment possibilities today. Don't forget to hit the bell below to subscribe and then like and share this video. Let's get the word out there.